Hey there, and welcome to the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. It is great to have you join us. This podcast series features those who have gained victory over a life encounter. With that life experience, we encourage those who are experiencing something that might seem to be insurmountable. We advance and encourage others by passing forward evaluated life experiences. We have three objectives in this podcast series. We want to encourage those who are engaged in any type of life encounter by offering to walk with you to help you gain victory over anything that might seem impossible. We want to share our experience to help you. Our second objective is to help you develop a confident resolve that there are multiple options to get past any life obstacle. It's a matter of thinking into the situation. Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you are facing a dilemma resulting from a previous decision you wish you could reverse, we want to help you think into all of the facts and factors involved in making an informed decision. I'm Ron Cooper, founder of the Cooper Culture. I'm with my wife and business manager, Marty. Together, we are the Cooper Culture Company who is sponsoring this podcast series. Today we feature Jillie Maria, who discusses in part, briefly, her date rape experience and the impact that had on her. Also, her family background of being emotionally abandoned and how those two have worked together to cause some trigger points in her life, but how she has learned to move forward beyond those two very traumatic events. And she's now developing a coaching business where she has taken those two experiences and made positive gains from this by helping others to overcome some life events that she has experienced. Marty, what are some takeaways our listeners can gain from Jillie?
Jillie, Ron, is a vibrant, take charge person in helping others that have experienced trauma to move forward, understand their emotional needs, and obtain a healthy outlook on life.
It's a great opportunity to be a chain breaker, and she is being just that as she is moving forward and taking the positive of a negative aspect of her earlier life. Let's listen and learn together. Jillie, it's great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in, perhaps you would call it, the journey you have gone through, or maybe are going through. Your past, a little bit of it, as you've described it, is you have overcome, you have unfortunately experienced rape, and you have experienced emotional abandonment. There may be some other similar topics of which are included in that, but our listeners are going to be very interested in your journey, just how you have learned to deal with, overcome, and those type things, because some of our listeners have, or maybe are experiencing the same type thing. They're not certain what their self-worth is, and it's part of the culture in which they've been raised. But Jillie, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Jillie, can you give a light overview of the past? We're not here to focus on the past, but just enough to give our listeners let's just say a clear emotional understanding of what the past has been that you are overcoming or maybe have overcome.
Sure, we'd be delighted to. So we'll go forward to go backwards. So I had a kind of trifecta of events happen in 2011, and it led me to finding a therapist. And that led me to a space of having a lot of aha moments in a small period of time. So I realized going to the therapist, I was very unique, at least according to my therapist, in that a lot of people go to therapy and they, long story short, blame everything on everybody else, take zero responsibility, and the therapist has to kind of get them to a space of responsibility before you can do the work. And I was in a space where I took responsibility for everything and realized that that's a part of the trauma response to, again, emotional abandonment as a child. And I want to share with your listeners that if you're in a space where you feel like people were physically present for you but they weren't emotionally present for you. Because a lot of times we go, oh, well, my mom and dad were always home. We had the storybook, Rockefeller, perfect painting family, but you had parents who weren't in a space, or grandparents, caregivers, it can extend, of people who you learned not to cry. You never showed emotion. You were always happy. Everything was always, you were a people pleaser. You were trying to perform. That is all statements of and signs of emotional abandonment. And so I discovered that and started to work on healing that. And, I didn't have a name for it. And I remember my therapist saying, so you were emotionally abandoned. And I went, light bulb, like boom. And it wasn't a space of, and hear me when I say this, it's not a space of finding fault or blaming. It's a space of saying they didn't know what they didn't know. Because our successive generations, people that are like 60 years plus, generally speaking, grew up in post-World War II families where emotion was not a thing. It was not something that, to quote my grandma, my dearly departed grandma, honey, emotion was not a luxury we had. The world was on fire. The world was at war, and people were dying left and right. My grandma was a World War II bride, and had this conversation with her when she was 90 years old. And she actually apologized to me for the legacy that she left our family, our extended family. A lot of times people don't even know that they are emotionally abandoned. They don't even know, because they're like, well, they did the best they could, or they were working 2 or 3 jobs to support our family and put food on the table, because that's what our parents and grandparents and great grandparents knew how to do. Emotional availability is I want to say a brand new thing, because relatively speaking to the last 30 to 50 years, it really is something where it's, people go, oh my God, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, like mental health actually matters. Like that's a brand new concept over the last 20 or 30 years that we're finally getting to the point of putting a spotlight on. And the other part of my story that's huge is, as you mentioned earlier, is I'm a rape survivor. I was date raped in the fall of 2022, or 2002 rather. And when I say date raped, it's the distinguishment is I knew my rapist. And probably in 90% or more cases of rape, the person does know they're raped. That's actually far more common than we talk about, because a lot of times we have this notion that it's someone that's in the shadows or someone that you don't know. And a stranger being a rapist is a really tiny percentage of rapes. As I was on my journey from 2011 forward, in 2013, through a succession of events, everything I had buried in terms of my rape came to the fore. And so I found a rape crisis counselor, and I started doing the work to heal that. And one of the things that I find, and I think your audience will find helpful, is that when we start talking about it and we get validation that it happened, and you don't need validation from the person who committed whatever it is. So if your parents were emotionally unavailable, you don't need them to admit to you that they were. My rapist, if I went to him today and said, you raped me, he'd be like, no, I didn't. And I didn't need that validation from him. And that's one of the misnomers that we get stuck in often, that a lot of people get stuck in, is I need that validation from the person who did it, as opposed to me, for example, as a coach, saying to one of my clients, hey, I see you, I hear you. Yes, that happened to you, and I'm so sorry it happened. That is just as much validation as the person who did it saying to you, I did this. Because a lot of times people don't know, like if you went up to somebody and said, you emotionally abandoned me, they don't know that language. That's like you walking up to someone as an American citizen speaking only English and trying to speak English to somebody in any other country in the world. And they're looking at you like, I can see that you're trying to talk to me, but I have no idea what you're saying. And so that's a lot of times where people get stuck, is they get stuck in that victim space because they are looking for something their mind is looking for something very specific before they can release it.
Talk to our listeners a little bit more about your early on statement. You knew how to be, I think the term was, accountable for it. And what I'm trying to differentiate, Jillie, is you learned how to helpfully be accountable, but you did not blame yourself for what happened. That's what I'm processing you're saying, but if I'm not characterizing what you said correctly, help us through that, because we have some listeners who may say, well, I'm to blame for my past.
So, yes. So one of the things that when we start to do our work, a lot of times what happens is we blame ourselves. We are like, effectively, you're stabbing yourself repeatedly and looking, again, you're looking for someone to be like, yes, if you stab yourself enough times, someone is going to notice you bleeding and take the knife out of your hand. Like, you've done enough, as opposed to being in a space of, like with my rape, for example, being in the space of realizing that my job was to stay alive. Because one of the things that you'll do as that a rape victim will do is he or she will blame themselves. I could have, and the society does that to us too, right? Where society will say, what was she wearing? What was she doing? If she hadn't been this, if that, and there's a million things that get said and a million assumptions that get made, as opposed to, and I'm not an advocate. I'm not an advocate for walking around naked in the street. Not at all. But the point of fact is that women get to do whatever they want in terms of like whatever you want to wear. I'm not an advocate for dressing like you're on South Beach on, in barely there bikinis. I wouldn't do it. But the reality of it is we live in a society still in 2023 where we have a lot of people who feel like victim blaming. Like, what was she doing? As opposed to, why was the man thinking that he had any domain over her, over another person? And being in the space of, for me, is, when I realized, when the full weight of, oh my God, I was raped and all this happened, came down on my head, talking through with my crisis counselor, and then her finally saying to me, what if your job was just to stay alive and get out of it, to survive? And I went, okay. And that's the truth in any trauma, right? Is our job, especially for little kids, like if you're in a space where you emotionally, your family was not available emotionally, if you were in a space where you only know survival, yes, your job was to survive it. And then when you get to the space of, as you said, overcoming it, is coming into, this is not my fault, relearning the beliefs, because we have so many beliefs that keep us stuck around, well, if I had just been a better daughter or a better son or a better whatever, my parents wouldn't have divorced. If I had been a better wife, my husband wouldn't have raped me. If I'd been a better girlfriend, if I had done this, if I had done that, this wouldn't have happened. That's where we put the blame on ourselves, as opposed to being in the space of, I did the best I could in the moment, and I know better now, so I'm going to get to the space of forgiving myself. And forgiveness has nothing to do with anybody but ourselves. And a lot of times we get the notion that, and it took me a long time to get that in my brain, because I at one point thought that forgiveness was, if I forgive my rapist, then he wins. And the reality of it is he would have no idea that he even did anything to me for him to be even forgiveness conversation to be. So my role was to forgive myself, to take that fish hook out of my mouth, to be in a space of, yes, I can overcome this. And a lot of times why we have a hard time with going into therapy or going into crisis counseling is because trauma becomes part of who we are. A client said to me about 3 years ago, well, who am I if I'm not my trauma? If I'm not a survivor of this, that, and the other thing, who am I? Like this moment of, mind-blowing moment of, we get, as trauma survivors, we have a tendency to lead with, I'm a survivor, as opposed to like now saying, I'm a business owner, I'm a coach, I'm a mom, I'm a da-da-da-da-da. And yes, I've survived those things. Yes, I am thriving after my rape. Yes, I've healed the emotional abuse. And abuse doesn't have to be like slapping somebody. It's a lot of times it's people just leaving you alone completely when you need a hug. For small children, it's important to realize, and even as you're growing up, teenagers now, right, is if parents or grandparents are in a space where they don't know how to express their emotions, they have a tendency to unintentionally emotionally abandon their children. And that looks like your kid gets a boo-boo. They're riding their bike and they spin out and they're in the dirt and their knees are scrubbed and, full of, blood and whatever. And the parent goes, rub some dirt on and keep going. That's okay to say to someone in their 20s or 30s that has the clue that, okay, I can wipe this off, put some stuff on it and put a Band-Aid on it and keep going. But a small child wants love. A small child is crying. If that parent of that child never got that love when they were learning to ride a bike or walk or ride a horse or drive a car or going through stuff that children go through, that parent has a gaping wound. Nobody ever handled it for them, so that wound is still there. And a lot of people in their 50s and older grew up in spaces where you didn't do that. You didn't go to therapy. You didn't do any of that. You just sucked it up, shoved it under the rug, and kept rolling. So there's no tools. People are trying to, tear up the ground and plant a garden with a butter knife, essentially. They have no idea that there's other tools that, like, hey, do you want a shovel? Do you want a tractor? Do you want a combine? Do you want something else that can help you get into this and support you?
I'm going to verbalize to you the way I'm processing what you're saying, and I want you to tell me if I'm processing it correctly. One is you are not a victim, but you're a victor over. That was a mindset or an attitude. The second thing I'm processing is that's all they knew, whoever they is. That's their culture. They were raised in that kind of environment. I, Jillie, do not exonerate what they did, but that's all they knew. So you're able to process that in the context that, yep, that was the environment they chose to carry forward. You may not use the word choose, but let's just say they chose to carry forward. What I'm reading into this is Jillie is saying, I'm a chain breaker. That's my term. I'm not going to carry forward some of those attitudes of the past. What I see as wrong, it stops with me. And further, I'm going to carry forward what I'm learning from this traumatic experience to help benefit others to have appropriate awareness. I hope I haven't oversimplified or not said what you experienced, but that's how I'm processing what you're saying.
Yes, yes, and yes. We are such a society of blame and fault that when you're able to say people don't know what they don't, and a lot of people like practical examples. So I tell people, I encountered a girl years ago when I was still in my racing days, and we were making dinner, and she's like, okay, someone said to her without even thinking, hey, can you just grab a pot from under the sink? We were in Airbnb, put some water in it and boil it, set it to boil and set the timer for 5 minutes. And everybody's going downstairs to do their thing and take showers and whatever. And this girl's standing in the kitchen and she's like, and I said, what's wrong? And she said, I can't do this. And I said, what can't you do? Like, to me, it's like, grab a pot, find the pots, put water in it, boil it and call it, everybody takes a shower, set it to 3, so we can all take showers, come up, set it to a hot boil and go. And she said, I don't know how to boil water. And I said, oh, okay, cool. So I said, do you know how to put water in a pot? And she's like, I don't know this kitchen. So I said, okay, let's do this. So I'm opening up, find the pot, put the water in it. So I'm telling her, teaching her step by step, do this, turn the burner, go downstairs, take your shower. It'll sit at 3. It'll start to warm up. When we get up here and there's someone to supervise it, we'll turn it to a hot boil, put the pasta in, we'll be done in 10, da-da-da. And she looks at me and she says, thank you. And I said, you're welcome. To me, it was no big deal. She didn't know how to boil water. She never learned how to do that. And we don't stop and think people don't know how to do basic things. So feeling emotions for a lot of people is a basic thing that a lot of people don't know how to do. I didn't know how to feel anger and rage. I had to be taught to feel anger in my 30s because it wasn't allowed. And I didn't know that it wasn't allowed until someone said, okay, well, what's, and I was like, oh God. And I realized that I'm not a rageful driver. That's my last, beating on the steering wheel and screaming at people and flipping people off, none of which I'm proud of, by the way, was my last, no one's going to hurt me because I'm in my car with myself, so I can flip people off and I'm not affecting it. But it was a way to get rage and anger out of my body until I learned a less destructive way to do it. So we don't know. It's not a blame or shame thing. It's, like you said, it's being a cycle breaker. I'm choosing to say, okay, there's a better way to feel my emotions, to express my emotions so that I get clarity. And then I can say, I'm experiencing, as opposed to I am angry, I'm experiencing anger. I'm going to clear all that out and then realize what I need is a hug or time with this person or to be left alone or whatever I might need.
One aspect of emotional intelligence is knowing who we are. Knowing who we are might include knowing what might trigger various anxieties with us. It could be words, it could be the tone of voice, it could be a picture, it could be anything that triggers various thoughts that come to mind that for some period of time can dominate our thoughts. Those thoughts are frequently something negative that might cause us to be angry, have an emotional response that, given enough time to think of what we said, we would try or would want to withdraw those words, but we can't. They're already out and open. As we know what can trigger various thoughts, anxieties, and so forth, we are better able to deal with those thoughts when they come up, because the first thing that would come up is a reminder, if I don't think into and think through this, I could react emotionally. I'm processing as well early on that you had, and you maybe still do, have various trigger points, and it has triggered anger, it has triggered some of the traumatic past, but I'm processing that you have learned how to process that because there was a part of your life where, you just accept it, you don't know how to deal with it. And I don't want to oversimplify and say things that do not represent you, but there's some listeners who are thinking the same thing. Well, that's part of the environment in which I feel I'm in. How do I deal with these trigger points? Because different things are said, I just pictured, I heard, and boy, that triggers a thought. And boy, I can go into a rage, or maybe I isolate, or something that's not healthy. How do you work, maybe even in your coaching, how do you help people through those kind of things?
Yes, that's actually really common, is that people will say, and one of my favorite things is, oh, that's just their personality. And it's actually not their personality. They just never learned to. They grew up in an environment, as you said, we swept everything under the rug, or we were trying to not, irritate or make angry mom, dad, grandma, Aunt Julie, whatever it might be, the person who is destructive to us if we tick them off. And so we learned to push it all down and suppress it. And what I do in my coaching is I will bring forward with people, we'll talk about the day's events, what's going on right now. And I'll end up saying things like, so the emotion that I'm feeling underneath for you is there's a lot of anger roiling up there, or there's disappointment, or there's resentment because you're not asking for what you need. Is that correct? And a lot of times that just triggers the tears or like red face or whatever's going on, to say, okay, we get to burn safely. I get to hold the container for them to feel those emotions. I recommend highly that until you know how to do that for yourself, I highly recommend employing a counselor, a coach, a therapist, somebody who can help you see those pieces and say, and with love, call you out and say, hey, with love, I feel like you have been swallowing emotions for a very long time. Does that ring true? And most of the time people will say, oh yeah, I'm getting chills when you're saying that, or I'm, yes, or all of a sudden, tears. And being able to be in a space where I've learned to say, because here's the thing, none of us were born angry. None of us were born enraged. None of us were born racist, sexist, any of the ists. We learn those things. And if we're in a space where, again, our mom, dad, grandma, stepmom, whatever, didn't feel emotions and was like, just suck it up. Or if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Those are phrases that our body goes, oh, the message to our body was, it's not safe to feel that emotion. It's not safe to cry. And so we're in a space where we get upset, we get angry, we get frustrated, and we're, we're going into King Kong. We're going into like rageful behavior, as opposed to saying, what if I just feel it? Because allowing yourself to feel an emotion versus being reactive to it are two different things. They're very different things. So if I can allow myself to be in a space of, for example, I feel angry when I'm driving in rush hour traffic because I have no control over other people. The fact that most people don't use blinkers or signals, I don't have any control over them, just woo, going over 3 lanes of traffic. Man, you almost just caused a 3-car accident and didn't even care. And, all those stories that I have in my head, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm getting in my car, I'm choosing to be in rush hour traffic. I get to be more aware. This is not personal. And I can be in a space of, wow, people are just in their own little world. And I get to take care of myself and allow myself to feel that emotion. Because when we can get to a space of allowing ourselves to have the space to express, that usually is for most people is either tears or shaking. With anger, rage, sadness, that usually is tears or shaking. Move that out of your body. When you get through a layer of those, you usually will be either giggling or your tears will dry, one or the other. And then allowing yourself to be in a space where that wound gets healed the next time that you are in traffic, for example, or the next time that your kids are raging and flipping out. You're like, okay, just feel that, burn through that, scream it out, kick the seat, be done, kick the seat, get it out, pound your little fist on the floor of the department store, kick it out, get on the bed, burn through that emotion. You done yet? Okay, I'll hold the space for you. Those are things you learn to, again, be a cycle breaker, to be in the space of, I'm going to learn how to correctly handle my emotions in a safe way so that, one, I'm clear on what I want and need, and I can ask for it in a healthy manner, even if the answer is no. And 2, I can be a cycle breaker, but I can also be a model for my kids. Like, I'm feeling angry right now. I'm going to take a minute, take a couple deep breaths, realize why I'm angry, get honest with myself, and then say, okay, let's reset the moment. Let's start this day again. I need this, and this from you. And then if your kids are in the space, one of the things I teach my clients is, with kids or spouses or other people that they live with, coworkers even, is what specifically do you need? What would make this day, this moment, this meeting go really smoothly for you? And then asking the question, like saying, and giving them the freedom to say no, to say yes, to change plans. That's what gives people the permission to break the cycle and to see it. And there's no shame or blame in it. There's just, what do you need right now to have this moment be reset? If you're going to have a great day, if you're looking back on this day when you get into bed in like 7 hours or 8 hours, what happened today that made it a great day?
I am also processing that the Julie of 2023 is very different from the Julie of 2005, 2010 or so. The Julie of 2023 can rationally think about, can be aware of, can process information, whereas the Julie of 2005, 2010 might have internalized, maybe engaged in self-blame, maybe did something other than the Julie of 2023. And again, I'm not trying to be a psychic. I'm just trying to learn the transformation, your mental transformation that appears you have gone through and are going through.
100%. And it's something where multiple teachers through multiple spaces since 2011 have said, it's not personal. You're taking things personal that aren't. When people say things like, oh, the world hates me, like, the world doesn't, no one hates you. But if you keep calling in and you keep deciding you're in a victim space because you're not asking for what you need, that's a mindset shift. To say, okay, the world doesn't hate me because I chose not to get gas the night before when I need to have a tight morning. Okay, so what's the shift that needs to happen? My mindset goes into practical action of, on the way home, getting a full gas tank. Huzzah, I get to get up in the morning, get in my car with a full tank of gas and go to work. The world doesn't, no one hates you. But we got to stop taking things personally.
That's very well said. For the listener who is intrigued with the journey you have been on, you are on, and they want to contact you to maybe engage you in therapy, coaching, whatever, how could that listener contact you?
They can look me up as JillieMaria.com, my website, www.JillieMaria.com.
Do you conduct your sessions virtually? Do they need to be in person? How can that be done?
Virtually.
Great. I'm going to guess the people who may be experiencing some of what you experience should not think of this as a quick one-time journey, or let's say a quick one-time session, but it's a journey over time. Would I be thinking of that correctly?
You are correct. We do not, would not be good practice to even consider doing, 10, 20, 30, 40 years worth of work in 1 hour. That would be incredibly destructive to your real life that you have to live before and after sessions. So yes, my programs typically are 3 months long and people typically repeat them. And listen, I've been on my journey since 2011. I'm 12 years in. It's the continuous thing of learning and discovering new things and new tools, etc. So yes.
Jillie, I want to thank you for talking about the emotions. And I do hope that there's a parent listening that thinks, I need to be a little more accepting. I need to be a little more rewarding to my teenagers, because children are hurting today. And that's what they need, acceptance. And I approve. And an emotional hug is what they need. So thank
100%.
you.
Thank you.
Jillie, I'll advance that just a little bit further by saying my perception is cell phones, technology have some great application, but yet sometimes those cell phones can be so addictive. We can be so centered on the normal interaction as we are interacting right now. It takes on a total different look with technology. I use the term voiceless, faceless, email, and so forth. It's a total different realm when we make the practice of and be intentional to be purposefully interactive, see eyeball to eyeball, which is an antiquated process for some people.
100%. And I think that, I like to encourage parents to say, okay, and even adults, put your phone down, put it face down. I was just on vacation and we were in a space where there was no service. And I realized it. And for a second I panicked. And then I went, you know what? Put the phone on airplane mode and don't worry about it. You're on vacation. And I did exactly that. The only thing I used my phone for many hours on my vacation was a clock. That was it. It's like, I just want to know what time it was. Okay, cool. We're good. And it was very freeing.
Jillie, on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for your life journey. It is continuing and we're all growing together. Thank you for passing on your life learning. And we are very much about evaluated life experiences. We've all experienced stuff of the past. But for those of us who will never proclaim to be a victim, we're victors over, we're going to pass forward our life experiences. You're doing just that. And on behalf of our listeners, I want to thank you for passing forward. Our hope is that you will have the opportunity to pass forward to a lot of people your life experiences so that we can live the vibrant life. I believe that you have a demeanor that is very different in a positive way than Jillie that used to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mental health is a topic that is getting and well-deserved increased attention. It is necessary for us to understand what mental health is, what it includes, how it applies to us. I used to think mental health, mental illness were synonymous, and I did not want to equate those two. I was led to believe that at an early age, I was mentally ill, incapable of learning, and so forth. But as I have gained life experience, I've learned it was my mental health that was not good. And I was a product of my past, processed thoughts, statements made in perhaps the wrong way, but I did the way I did. And those thoughts at various times could be triggered by various negative thoughts, and I believed some very negative things about myself. One of those negative things was I believed I was stupid and not capable of learning. There are some instances in many of our past that we need to be aware of and be able to deal with when various trigger points come up that could inspire negative thinking, which to me, negative thinking has everything to do with mental health. Negative thinking can lead to negative actions, can lead to wrong actions, wrong thoughts, and cause us to think very negatively about ourselves and can result in despondency, isolation, depression, any number of things. We need to get over ourselves. I use that term, and that's an overly simplistic term, but we do need to be aware of those things about us that can cause things in us to trigger anger, anxieties, any number of things. But it is a matter of us taking an introspective look, dealing with, and sometimes we need the support of others outside of ourselves who prove themselves to be safe spaces, who know us well, who care about us, who can speak to us very candidly. But the safe space represents being able to have a conversation knowing you're not going to think less of me because of your observations, but we together can work through whatever is dominating some of my negative thinking. When we reach that point, we can work toward a better thought process, a better fulfilled life, and many of us need coaching. Everyone can benefit from a coach. Marty and I are being coached. We are certified life coaches through the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. We can help people through various challenges in life to overcome anything that is keeping you from performing at your maximum potential. We'd like to have the opportunity to work with you to demonstrate how we can help you perform at your maximum potential. Contact us to schedule a 30-minute complimentary session where we can demonstrate to you how we help people overcome and become the very best person God created us to be. Contact us at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We hope we can warrant a 5-star rating with this podcast series. We hope you will want to share this podcast with your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn connections, your Twitter and Instagram communities. The more we share, the greater the opportunity we will have to comment and share different ideas with each other, share those opportunities from which we have learned to carry forward some things that have worked and just say, well, that did not work for me. The more we share, the greater the opportunity we will benefit others. We hope we also had the opportunity to speak with your group, to relay some life experiences, to talk with your group about ways to become the very best God created you to be. You can contact us at espeakers.com. Search for Ron Cooper, F4 Pilot. I look forward to having the opportunity to speak with your group, to share life opportunities, and leave your audience with ways to become the best person God created us to be. We look forward to working with you.